on the pasuk Kedoshim to you, ki kodesh ani Hashem Elokechem. You should be kadosh because I am kadosh. You got it, is kadosh. Omer HaKadosh Baruch Hu Yisrael. Ad shelo barosi olomi. Hashem says, before I created the world, the heavenly angels will praise me with you, and they sanctified my name because of you. Meaning, I was esteemed because of you who are going to come into existence in the future. What did they say? We say this every night in the Birchas Kriya Shema. They would say, Baruch Hashem Elokei Yisrael min ha'olam ad ha'olam. Blessed is Hashem, the God of Israel, from this world to the world to come. So this is before existence. Before man came into existence, they would say, Baruch Hashem Elokei Yisrael. Who is Hashem? The God of Israel. That's how they identified me, they praised me. Kevet Shenivar Adam Rishon. When Adam Rishon was created, Adam, is this the person, when we praise you, we say, Elokei Yisrael, is this the person? Is this Elokei Yisrael? Amalahem, lo. No. Ganafu. He's not the one because he's a thief. Why is Adam a thief? Shenema v'tochel min ha'etz. He ate of the tree that he wasn't permitted to eat from the tree. So the tree was not given to him to partake of. So therefore, when we say Elokei Yisrael, he's not the one, because he's a thief. Now, it's interesting. If you remember, at the beginning of Vayikra, when it spoke about Karbonos, it says, Yakriv Odom. Do you remember? It's literally the very beginning of the Parsha Vayikra. So Rashi cites the Chazal. Why does it say Odom, not Ish, Yakriv Ish? Because when one brings a Karban, it has to be similar to Odom. Just as when Odom was created, the whole world belonged to him. And therefore, he would bring a sacrifice. It was his because there was no one else. He was the sole owner of existence. Identically, when you bring a Karban, it should be similar to Odom. So seemingly from there, it would seem to be the whole world in its heart was Odom's. The whole concept of stealing had no relevance to Odom. The Medrash says no. Hashem says the world is all yours to partake of, except for the tree of knowledge. So the tree of knowledge, the Eitz Hadas, was not for us to take of. Therefore, if he takes of it, if partakes of it, he's a thief. So Hashem says it's not possible it's him because Ganafu, he's a thief. The Gemara tells us in Brochos, the two psukim in Tilim, which seem to be contradictory. We say in the Hallel, which we say today, we're going to say, the celestial, the heaven is God's, and the terrestrial was given to mankind. But yet David says, the world in its entirety is Hashem's. So how do we reconcile both psukim? David says, Oretz Nasan Levnei Odom. So the Gemara answer is, Lashem Oretz Meloa Zeh Kodim Brocha. Before you acknowledge Hashem is the master of the universe, it's all his. Once you've acknowledged that he's the master, Hashem says, now you can partake of the terrestrial. Only Lacha Brocha is it Oretz Nasan Levnei Odom. So my Rishiv Zechariah explained it this way. The Gemara tells us in Psochim that what's the halacha? The blood of the animal before they sprinkle it, or any part of the animal before they put it on the mizbeach. What is it? It's called Kodesh Hashem. If you benefit from it, it's a Torah violation. You're not permitted to benefit. But once the blood was sprinkled on the mizbeach, there was a drainage system under the mizbeach, and everything would actually flow to a valley. And they would sell the blood as fertilizer to fertilize the fields. So Mar asks, how did you do it? It's consecrated blood. So Mar says that before the avoda, it's called Kodesh Hashem. When you designate something to be exclusively for Hashem, you're not permitted to partake of it. But once it's actually utilized for its original designated purpose, it reverts back to an ordinary status because it's fulfilled its purpose. So he would say, the Navi says that the world was created l'chvodi barosiv. What is the value of creation? For God's glory. So man has to recognize the world is God's glory. Once you've made that recognition by acknowledging him, by saying Hashem melech haolam, God is the king of the universe, the Almighty. Once you've made that acknowledgement, the world has fulfilled its purpose. Once it fulfills its purpose, now it reverts back to an ordinary status. It's only exclusively God's, only because its value is that purpose. Once you've made that acknowledgement, now Oretz Nosal Livnei Odom. Hashem had said regarding Eitz Hadas, that's not for you to partake of. So if it's not for you to partake of, therefore, even though under no circumstance can you take it. So when Adam ate of the tree of knowledge when he was not supposed to eat of it, this is Lashem Oretzim Loa. The world, that was always Hashem's. He never gave it to mankind. Therefore, Adam is Ganaf. Therefore, Adam is a Ganaf, is a thief. Therefore, when you praise me as Hashem Elokei Yisrael, it's definitely not referring to Adam, because he's a thief, because he's a Ganaf. That's the understanding. So it's interesting. There's a famous machlokas argument between the Rambam and the Ravid that if a Jew eats not kosher, person wants to eat a McDonald's burger, do you say bracha? Because since you're benefiting, the Gemara says that if you eat or drink of this world and you don't acknowledge Hashem as the master, it's mo'al. You're benefiting from something that's consecrated. So what about if you eat something not kosher? So the Ravid says, definitely not. One doesn't say a bracha if you eat not kosher, because you're not permitted to eat it. So, but the Rambam says, but factually you're benefiting. You're benefiting from it. Right? So therefore, the case, it says, is mo'al. So since you're nena, you're benefiting, you have to say a bracha. That's the position of Rambam. Of Ravid says, no, you're not permitted. It's considered menayitz. It's considered like you're blaspheming God by taking something, say a bracha on something you're not permitted to take. So seemingly, this would support the Ravid. Adam was Ganaf. That was never given to him. So how do we answer Rambam from this, from the Eitz Hadas? The answer is something, even though you're not permitted to eat something, but you're still permitted to own it. Oh, you have ownership rights. So it could be because you have relevance. Eitz Hadas, Adam had no relevance to. At any level, he was not permitted to have relevance to that fruit of that tree. Therefore, he was considered Ganov, even according to Rambam, and therefore he was not permitted to partake of it, even if he would say a bracha. I mean, it's a good question to ask. When Adam ate of the Eitz Hadas, did he say a bracha before he ate the fruit, or didn't he say a bracha? Did he say Bar Pri Eitz? Many years ago, I think, I'm not sure if Alan was there, we went to see Rav Mordechai Eliyahu. Zechat Tzaddik L'Vrocha, he was the Sephardic chief rabbi of Israel, and we're in his home, and he asked a question to the group. Jay was definitely there at the time, and he asked the group, it says, when you would eat the mun in the desert, whatever you would have in mind, the mun should take on that type of food, it took on that type of food. So if you want it to taste like bread, tastes like bread, like fruit, tastes like fruit. It actually had the texture of fruit, according to one opinion. So when you ate the mun, did you say Bar Pri Eitz? Or did you say Hamotzi? What bracha did you say on the mun? That was the question he asked. He put it out there and he was smiling and laughing when he asked the question. I mean, you could say either way. Factually, it was still mun. You know, it's like if you create artificial food with the same nutrients and the same nourishment, even though it has the nourishment of fruit, you say Bar Pri Eitz, you say a shako. So the mun, although it took on that value, but factually, it's not the tree of it's not the fruit of the tree, it's not the fruit of the ground, and it's not bread. Didn't grow out of the ground. So I mean, simply the answer was definitely you would say a shakal on it. You would not say the bracha, regardless of what value it took on. Okay, just as an aside. But it says Hashem says Adam's definitely not the one. When you say Elokei Yisrael, it's not Adam, Koganaf. But Noach comes on the scene. Amar lo zehu. So the angels say to Hashem, is he the one? When we say Baruch Hashem Elokei Yisrael, is Noach the person? Amar lahem, Zeh Shikaru. He's a drunkard. Can't be him. He's a drunkard. Shenemar Vayesh min hayayin vayishkar. He drank of the wine since he planted the vineyard. This is when he became drunk. Therefore, definitely, I don't pride myself that he is my so-called, I am his God. Elokei Yisrael. Omer Avram. Avram comes on the scene. Avram introduces monotheism to the world. Amru Lefonov. Zehu. Is he the one? Hashem Elokei Yisrael, is Avram the one? Amalem Zeger. He's a convert. Why? What do you mean he's a convert? Hushiyotzi meni Yishmael. Because he's the one, he fathered Yishmael. So because he fathered Yishmael, that's a shortcoming. We'll explain this in a moment. Therefore, he's definitely not Yisrael. Hashem Elokei Yisrael. Amad Yitzchak. Amru Lufanov. Zehu. Now Yitzchak comes into existence. Is he the one? Yitzchak is what? He was circumcised at the age of 8 days old. He's the Ola Tmima. He's the unblemished offering. Amalen Oev es Oevu Lusoni. He loves the one who I hate. He loves Esav. Shenemar Vayev Yitzchak gets Esav. He loved Esav. Therefore, he cannot be. That's a shortcoming. That's a shortcoming in Yitzchak. Kevat Shabo Yaakov. Now Yaakov finally comes into existence. Yaakov is the Bechir Sheba Avos. He's the most perfect of the patriarchs. He's the one who fathered the Shiftei Koch. Omru Lefon of Zehu. So the angels ask Hashem, is he the one? Amalan Hain, he's the one. When you say Elokei Yisrael, he's the one. That I identify with him. Chenu Omer, Lo Yikori Shimcha Od Yaakov. After he had fought with the Malach, Hashem had said, you will no longer be called Yaakov, Kim Yisrael Yishmecha. Your name, your classification is Yisrael. V'nikru kol Yisrael Shmo. And Yaakov, who Hashem had called him Yisrael, we as the Jewish people, we carry his name. Our classification is Yisrael, not Yaakov. We're called Bnei Yisrael. We're not referred to as Bnei Yaakov. Bosashah, at that moment, Kiddush HaKadosh Baruch Hu Yisrael L'Shmo. Hashem sanctified Klal Yisrael because we are the sons of Yaakov, who became Yisrael. He sanctified us to be his people. Shenemar Yisrael b'cha espoer. Through you, I will be glorified, because we emanate from the patriarch who didn't have any imperfections. Now, how do we understand it? It's not Avram because he had Yishmael. It's not Yitzchak because he loved the one who I hate. It's Yaakov. The Gemara tells us at the end of Shabbos that, if you understand the story, why did Avram have Yishmael? Because his mother wasn't a matriarch. His mother was the daughter of Paro. She was an Egyptian. So therefore, the reason why the negative characteristics of Yishmael manifest themselves, of course, the mother was Hagar, even though she was a tzaddikus, but still, her pedigree was Egyptian. What about Yitzchak? Was the same pedigree as Yaakov? The answer is because who he was, he loved the one who I hate, because despite his pedigree, he was a Russia, Esau. Therefore, he's not the one. So the Gemara tells us at the end of Shabbos that as a result of the Eitz Hadas and the Nochosh, there was a certain level of impurity within Avram, Yitzchak, and initially in Yaakov. How do we see that impurity was still within Yaakov, Avram? It manifests itself in Yishmael. Yishmael was a product, was an expression of that impurity from the Eitz Hadas and the Nochosh. And how do we see that Yitzchak still possessed that impurity? And it expressed itself that he had Esav. Esav was a representation of that impurity. Yaakov, he was able to achieve within himself to expunge through his avoda, through his level of investment and choices, he achieved the level of purity. And because he achieved the level of purity, the zuama, the spiritual pollution was not within him. and therefore his children were shiftei ko. It was mitoso shlemo. All his children were tzaddik for that reason. As a result of that, because Avram was the pure one, he didn't have this level of impurity from the Eitz Hadas and the Zuma. Therefore, Hashem says, "I Hashem Elokei Yisrael." Therefore, I identify with him, Elokei Yisrael. But it's interesting. Every day we say in the Shron Esrei, Elokei Avram, Elokei Yitzchak, Yaakov. Hashem, when he identifies himself, when he identified himself to Yitzchak, he says, "I'm Elokei Avram Avicha." He said to Yaakov, "I am Elokei Avram Yitzchak Avicha." Hashem is identifying himself as Elokei Avram, Elokei Yitzchak, Elokei Yaakov. So how do we reconcile it? But yet it says Hashem Elokei Yisrael, meaning that's like a subcategory. Once you achieve Yisrael, the subcategory is, now we talk about the antecedents who brought that about. Why was Yaakov Yaakov? Because he was preceded by 2 generations earlier, Avram and Yitzchak. Let's say it would have never manifested itself. There would have never been a Yaakov. Then both Avram and Yitzchak would have had the shortcoming. But since ultimately the end result of Avram and Yitzchak was Yaakov and it was Yisrael, therefore now we talk about Elokei Avram, Elokei Yitzchak, Elokei Yaakov. Because now they take on a greater level of value because of the end result of what they brought about. That's the way I understand. That's how we reconcile this with Elokei Yisrael and Elokei Avram, Elokei Yitzchak, Elokei Yaakov. The full to give us the clarity. Good.
Perhaps it's called God of Israel from Hashem's perspective, because from his perspective only Israel is perfect, but from our perspective we need to recognize and acknowledge the fact that there are antecedents to Israel that were great, maybe not 100% perfect, but that's why from our perspective we say God of Abraham, Isaac, and Yaakov.
Okay. Could you imagine the creator? Hashem creates the world, God's infinite. And when he introduces himself, he says, "You know what my claim to fame is? I'm Elokei Avram." Yeah, the omnipotent one, the one who's the almighty, he says, "You know who I am? I'm Elokei Avram." Like, Alan in his office, he has, a plaque from the best cardiologist in New York City. Okay. And he says, "You know who I am?" He says, "I am a student of Rabbi Kalatsky." You understand? That's his claim to fame. Hashem is the creator, the omnipotent one, infinite. You know who I am? Elokei Avram. That's who I am. You know who I am? I'm Elokei Yitzchak. You know who I am? Elokei Yaakov. That's who I am. That's my claim to fame. What exactly is Hashem saying? What is the value of existence? To recognize who he is. If you don't recognize who he is, it's irrelevant that he's the creator, he's the omnipotent, he's infinite, all means nothing. My value is only value because there was an Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. They gave me my value. We once asked the question, according to the Maharal of Prague, the number 4 always represents dispersion or lack of cohesiveness. Because we have four things in 4 corners. One has no relevance to the other. 5 is always coalescing. You bring it all together, because if you put the 5th point in the middle, it brings the 4 corners together. 5 is like 1. 5 brings it together. So we asked the question, Yud-Kei Vav-Kei, which Rashi says throughout Shas is Shema Meforosh. That is the main name of Hashem, Yud-Kei Vav-Kei, which represents Ho-Yehovah, that he's infinite, and master. It's 4 letters. So how could you say 4 is lacking of substance where everything is Yud-Kei Vav-Kei? Remember, we asked this question in the past. So we said that Yud-Kei Vav-Kei has value because there's a 5th. The 5th is Klal Yisrael. We are number 5. We give that 4, give the value, it's 5, we bring it all together. That's the understanding. Because if not, there wouldn't be a Klal Yisrael, Yud-Kei Vav-Kei Yisrael, say you're the creator, the infinite, has no relevance to mankind. Came to Sinai, they weren't interested in taking the Torah, and the value of existence, of creation, was for the sake of the Torah. So if not for us, the world, Hashem says, I'm reverting the world back to pre-existence, because everything only has value only if there's a Klal Yisrael, if there'll be a Torah. So with number 5. So the Avos HaKadoshim, the holy patriarchs, Hashem is Elokei, you're the creator. But who am I? What gives me value regarding the objective of existence? Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. Therefore, Elokei Avram, who represented Chesed, and Yitzchak, who represented Din, and Yaakov represented Rachmim, that's who I am. That's why Hashem identifies with the patriarchs, not saying I'm just the creator. Creator doesn't mean anything. It's only going to manifest itself and actualize itself as the purpose of why Hashem created its existence. We brought about that objective. We brought it to fruition. Hashem is Elokei Yisrael. Hashem should introduce himself. Elokei Avram, Elokei Yitzchak, Elokei Yisrael. Right? When Hashem introduces him, Elokei Yaakov, this is post the moment that Hashem already changed his name to Yisrael. Right? He's speaking to Moshe Rabbeinu. You know who I am? Elokei Avram, Elokei Yitzchak, Elokei Yaakov. Why Elokei Yaakov? Hashem should say Elokei Yisrael. Why does he say Elokei Yaakov, not Elokei Yisrael? Question bothered me. On Shabbos, when we speak about the gift of Shabbos, who did Hashem give it to? L'zera Yaakov Asher Bam B'chorto. We refer to the progeny of Yaakov. Who you chose them. It doesn't say you gave it to the progeny L'zera Yisrael. We say on Shabbos L'zera Yaakov Asher Bam B'chorto. Why?
Hashem doesn't need us. Hashem created us. So,
okay.
Yeah.
But Hashem is referred to as Melech Yisrael. We say on Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, Kol Hashem Neshama B'Apo, V'yeda Kol Pol Ki Atafalto. Right? We say this in that paragraph. V'yeda Kol Pol Ki Atafalto, V'yeda Kol Yitzuk Ki Ato Yitzato, V'yoma Kol Hashem Neshama B'Apo. Anyone who possesses a soul in his Ba'apo, he will say, Hashem Elokei Yisrael. A person who has a soul, all in humanity, will say, Hashem Elokei Yisrael. They will declare, identify as Hashem as Elokei Yisrael. We're not talking about the angels. We're talking about all humanity. Kol Hashem Neshama Ba'apo. The one who had the soul infused through his nostrils, that species will say Hashem Elokei Yisrael. They will recognize what they are. They're just like side issues. Who is Hashem Elokei Yisrael? Why? Why did God create the world? If God is perfect on the absolute level, why did God have to create existence? Right? There's a famous question which was asked by the Ramchal. So Ramchal explains, when we speak about goodness, good on the absolute level is Hashem. God doesn't have any needs. God doesn't have to do anything. But good does good. So if good does good, and you want to bring about something which is the ultimate goodness, what's the ultimate goodness? To create a being that it should be worthy to partake of that goodness. That was Olam Chesed Yibana. That was the Chesed why Hashem created the world. That there should be a human being who should be a beneficiary of the ultimate goodness, that he should be able to partake and cleave to the source of all goodness, which is Hashem himself. That was the impetus to bring about existence. God has no needs. That's the understanding. So God needs nothing. But for the human being, for we to be worthy of that relationship, we have to recognize God to be the Melech. Not that God needs it. God needs nothing. But it's for us, we need to acknowledge that to be beneficiaries, to have a relationship with the King. That's the understanding. In the first paragraph of the Shema, Vishinantam levonecho, and Rambam writes, Mipi Shmuel lamdu, it was given at Sinai, vonecho elu talmidecho. Vonecho doesn't mean your progeny, your physical children. It means your talmidim, your students. That's the pasuk Vishinantam levonecho. So the Rambam says, a father has an obligation to teach his son. The Rambam quotes a pasuk. And a grandfather has an obligation to teach his grandchild Torah. And kol chacham v'chacham b'Yisrael, these are the words of Rambam, Hilchos Talmud Torah. And every person who's a chacham, who possesses Torah knowledge, chayev lamed es hatalmidim, those are the words of Rambam, has an obligation to teach the students. You have an obligation to teach students. Rambam says, a father has an obligation to teach his son. A grandfather has an obligation to teach his grandson. But a chacham, chayev lamed es hatalmidim. You must teach talmidim. So I ask the question. The Rambam should say, chayev lamed es Yisrael. You have an obligation to disseminate Torah. What do you mean to teach your students? You're only a student after you've learned. Once you've learned, now you're a student. Right? You can't put the cart before the horse. Right? But yet the Rambam says, chayev lamed es talmidim. You should say, chayev lamed es ben chaveiro. You must teach your fellow son. Or just Jews in general. What does he say as a talmidim? So the way I understood the Rambam was this way. You have a child, a son, and your son has no interest in learning. Has no interest. A father, due to the relationship father and child, you have an obligation to bring about an interest that your child should be interested. A grandfather has an obligation because it's your grandchild. You must teach him Torah. He's not interested. You have to create a setting that he should be interested. What about if you're a chacham? A chacham, a talmid chacham, to teach someone who's not a son or grandchild, if the person wants to study, you have an obligation to offer him that Torah knowledge. But if he's not interested in studying, you have an obligation to disseminate Torah. You only have an obligation to transmit the Torah to a person who wants to receive that. As a chacham, a parent, it's your child. A grandfather, it's your grandchild. A chacham, if he's your talmid, if he's willing to be your talmid, then you have an obligation to teach him. So, what's so special? That means it's only due to the interest of the recipient. That's when the Rebbe becomes the Rebbe. So what creates that connection? If the person wants to be the student, the Rebbe has to deliver. Hashem is Melech. We have to acknowledge him as Melech. If we acknowledge him, then we're beneficiaries. Otherwise, you don't acknowledge him, there's no relationship. And there's no worthiness.
Again, being
if you should bring a peace offering to Hashem, you should bring it meaning it should be done with a willingness. You should do it for the right reason. We'll see Rashi in a minute. Rashi, now we discussed earlier already. We discussed the offering of the Shlomim. What is this speaking about? Now there's a concept which is this is the baser. It's called pigul. That if a Kohen, when he officiates, if he has the improper thought, that improper thought invalidates the korban. And it invalidates to the point that if the Kohen finishes the avoda, if you eat of that korban, the liability is koris. Okay? If you eat a korban which is invalidated, the liability is not koris. But if the Kohen has this improper thought, which we discussed in a moment, what the improper thought is, and he finishes the service, he completes it. The service of avoda is the four components. There's shchita, there's kabbalah sadam. You receive the blood, you transport it, and you sprinkle it on the mizbeach. If the Kohen had this improper thought at the time of shchita that he will sprinkle the blood not in its proper time or its proper location, or the korban will be eaten not in its proper time, its proper location. If the Kohen has that improper thought, the korban becomes pigul. Pigul means it's something which is like it's abominated. It's more than possible, more than not invalidated. So Rashi says, "Lo nempashizu el lamed shlo teisi chosen el amnas leochel betochas manazeh." The Kohen, when he officiates, he has to have in mind that when he's officiating, that this korban will be eaten during its proper time. Because here, if the Torah tell me what is the time period which you eat it, which Shlom is eaten 2 days and a night, we said it earlier. So this is not just repeating what we had learned before. So here we're speaking about the intent of the Kohen when he does the service. When initially he does the zvicha, the shchita, te al menas nachas ruach lochem l'rotzo. You do it. The Kohen simply has to have. He's doing it to bring pleasure to God, meaning that you're doing His will. So chimtashu olav machsheves pigul in parentheses brackets lo yirotz alechem. The korban will not be accepted. It's lo yirotza. It will be invalidated. V'ritzotchem seno lom nibkan. What's the halacha? The Gemara in Chulot speaks. A person throws a knife, and he throws the knife at a wall, and as it's going through there, it cuts the throat of a cow, and it does a perfect shechita. Are you permitted to eat the korban, the animal? It's not kosher. It has been consecrated. Jay's an expert in Chulot. The Gemara says you're permitted to eat it. Because for shchita schulin, you don't need any level of kavanah. As long as it comes through initiative of a person, then it's a valid shchita. What about if it's kochim? You have to minimally know it's a korban. That the act is you're slaughtering an animal, whether it's chulin or kochim, that doesn't make a difference. It may not be a qualitative korban, but it's a valid shchita. It doesn't invalidate the animal. Of course, at least you're aware that you're doing an act of shechita, but if you threw the knife and you never intended it should do any act, it shouldn't do an act of slaughtering, the korban's not valid. That's called misasik. The Gemara says in Shabbos, what's misasik on Shabbos? A person sees a gourd in his vegetable patch, and he thinks it's detached, and it's attached, and he picks it up. So his intention was never to detach it. That's called misasik. Or a person has 2 gourds, one's attached, one's detached, and mistakenly his hand moves to the side and he picks up the one that's attached rather than taking the ones that's detached. That's misasik. That's less than shogeg. He has no obligation even to bring a chatos in that situation. Does not bring a sin off. That's less than inadvertent, because he never even intended to do the act. Shogeg means you thought it was Sunday and it turned out to be Shabbos. You were not aware that it was Shabbos, but you cooked or you reaped. That's shogeg. Here, the person never even intended to do the act. Give you an example, the application of this. You go into your bathroom and you towel on the towel rack, which is right near the light switch on Shabbos. And as you reach for the towel, accidentally you hit the light switch. You put the light switch on Shabbos. That's less than shogeg. That's not even shogeg. That's called misasik. I intended to take the towel, and accidentally my hand hit the light switch and put the light switch on. That's called misasik, because you never intended to even do the action of flicking the switch on, putting it on. Same thing here. You do one act, and as a result of that, something else happens. By kochim, it's not valid. By chulin, it's a valid shechita. Okay?
Rabbi, you're saying if the Kohen does, korban and he has an improper thought, and you're the,
But it depends what the proper thought is.
okay,
If he
like you
has a
said,
mind to take
location or,
carbon and slaughter it for Shimon, or he thought it was a chatos, so he brought it as a shlum. That's a different improper thought. It's specifically within the context of eating it not in its proper time, or doing the service not in its proper location.
so
or-
the
or
person
proper time.
who brought the korban, you're saying if he, benefits from that korban,
Not benefits, eats it, or
Eats
anybody,
it.
not only the one who owned the animal. Any Jew who eats that carbon,
it's
the
correct?
liability is kares.
Now, so how, my question is then, how are you supposed to know what the Kohen's thinking?